Welcome to Malvern Books, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out on this beautiful Tuesday night. This is going to be such a wonderful reading. I've been looking forward to this for a long, long time. I want to thank everybody who is part of y'all organized this, didn't you, Elizabeth? Y'all did this. Just thank you so much for coming to us. Thank you guys for being here at Malvern Books. And I will now introduce our readers tonight, of course, everybody knows, are going to be Elizabeth McCracken and Sabrina Orah. And their books, of course, are right over on the table over there. I hope you buy some, and if you ask them, they'll probably sign them because they're nice people. So, we will start with Elizabeth. Elizabeth McCracken is the author of 6 books. Here's Your Hat, What's Your Hurry, The Giant's House, Niagara Falls, and All Over Again, an exact replica of a figment of my imagination, Thunderstruck and Other Stories, and the forthcoming Bowlaway, which I cannot wait to see. She lives in Austin, where she's the James A. Michener Chair in Creative Writing at the University of Texas at Austin. Thank you.
Hi guys. I'm weirdly nervous, although not nervous. And to be reading with Sabrina and Boiled Milk, which she is going to read from, it's such an amazing book. And I have been nervously figuring out what I was going to read with it, and finally decided to read a story of unpleasant motherhood, or charged motherhood, because it seemed to go with Wild Milk. And so I'm going to read it, and then I'll introduce Sabrina. It's been a while since I've given a reading, so I kept changing my mind about what I was going to read, and I've never read this before. It's a story called Bird Song from the Radio, which is not really a great title for this story, but it was one of those titles where I thought, I really want to write something with that title. So I forced it. Long ago, Leonora told her children, and the telling was long ago too, I was just ordinary. Of course, they didn't believe her. She was taller than other mothers, with a mouthful of nibbling, nuzzling teeth and an affectionate chin she used as a lover. Her hair was brown, her eyes taurine. Later the children would look at the handful of photographs of their mother from the time, all blurred and ill-lit, as though even the camera were uncertain of who she was. And they would try to remember the gobbling slide of her bite along their necks, their mouth toothed and Lucy on a shoulder. The threat of more, she was voracious. They could not stop laughing. No, no, again. Children long to be eaten. Everybody knows that. Don't you want to devour that child, Leonora asked. Oh, look at that bottom. I'm going to bite it. I'm going to eat that child whole. To speak of love as cannibalism, she would have thought it strange herself before her marriage. But here were the children. Rosa, Marco, Dolly, plump loaves of bread, delicious. Those were the days before the buses came in. The children could hear from their bedroom windows the screech of the streetcars up the hill. Their father ran his family's radio manufacturers, and there were radios in every room of the house, pocket and tabletop, historic cathedrals. His name was Alan. Poor Alan, Leonora called him, and they both understood why. He was enthralled with his wife. He was a very bus of a man, practical and mobile, and he left the children to Leonora, who had a talent for love, as he had a talent for business. Winters, she took the children tobogganing. Summers, they piloted paddle boats across the city pond. She never dressed for the weather. No gloves, no sun hats, no shorts, no scarves. She was always blowing on her fingers or fanning her skirt against her torso. Sunburn, windburn, soaking wet with rain. The children, too. Other mothers sent them home with hand-me-down mittens and umbrellas. Not surprising, said those mothers later. She never took care of her children. Rosa, Marco, Dolly, Leonora took them to see the trolleys the last day they ran. She wore a green suede coat, the same color as the trolleys in solidarity. It closed with black loops, which Leonora assured her children were called frogs. It's raining, said Leonora. The frogs will be happy. That's not a frog, said Marco. He was 5, the age of taxonomy. They are, said Leonora, I promise, and my shoes are alligator. Why are we watching the streetcars? Asked Marco. There's no beauty in buses, Leonora said. A bus can go anywhere it likes. Trolley is beautiful. Oh yes, said Rosa, who was 7. I can see. Leonora was as melancholy as if the streetcars had been haunted into extinction. They were lovely captives who could not get away, and they left only their tracks behind. Her coat fastened with frogs. Her shoes were alligator. Perhaps she was already turning into an animal. The children grew bigger and bony. Leonora grew worse about love. She demanded it. She kissed too hard. She grabbed the children by the arms to pull them close. You seized me, said Dolly, aged 6. Why did you seize me so? I was looking for a place to nibble, said Leonora. But Dolly was a skinny girl. Leonora begged. She really did now. Moments later, contrite, writhing, she would say, the problem is I love you so. Can I be near you? Do you mind? What happened to Leonora? It was the sad story that ran through her family, which had begun centuries ago and wove through every generation. A great-grandfather had lived 3 decades in an asylum. An aunt had killed herself. And the story had not reached its conclusion yet. This chapter was being told in Leonora. Or she had a fall in the bathroom, and it broke all the vials that contained her essence, and all the chemicals in her body mixed together inside her, and foamed and smoked and ran over. Or she missed her children who were growing up. The doctors prescribed pills she refused to take. She still tried to eat her children, but they were afraid of her, so she had to sneak. The weight of her as she sat on the edge of their beds in the middle of the night was raptorial, ominous, yet indistinct. At any moment she might spread her arms and pull the children from the sheets through the ceiling into the sky, the better to harm them elsewhere. The children took to sleeping in the same bed. Rosa, Marco, Dolly, too old to sleep together, but they had to. They chose a different bed every night and lay still as they heard her go from pillow to pillow, the unfurling flump of the sheets like the wings they thought they could see on her back. Come back to bed, said poor Alan from the hallway in a terrified voice. Come listen to the radio and fall asleep. The top of his head was bald. The children could see the bathroom light cool in a little dent in his scalp, just below his summit. The children had radios in their rooms too, of course. He snapped one on, the classical station, to calm them down. You need never be lonely with a radio, he always said. But they knew that wasn't so. A radio station was another way grown-ups could talk to you without ever having to listen. It was Rosa who told poor Alan that they had to go. She was 15. We're leaving, she told them. You can come if you want to, but Marco and Dolly and I are going. Then, seeing his face, we'd like you to come. She's help, he said. She won't get it. He nodded. How will we manage? We're not managing now, said Rosa. In a year I'll get my license. I'll drive the little kids to school. The little kids. She was only 2 years older than Marco, who was 3 years older than Dolly. What will happen to your mother, said poor Alan, wringing his hands. Whatever it is, it's already happening, said Rosa. I can't watch anymore. She's a wonderful mother, you must remember that. I don't, said Rosa. I can't, not anymore. He wasn't a bad man. He could be mistaken for thinking it was a war, an ancient one, and that she would fight against the rest of them as long as she were new. In the winter, he took Rosa and Marco and Dolly to see a new house, and Leonora was left behind. He arranged for her disability checks. He didn't take her off the bank account. The father hired a nanny, Madeline, a jug-eared, freckled beauty, a good girl, as her father later described her to the news cameras. She picked up the children every day after school and brought them to the house. Rosa worshipped her. Dolly and Marco merely loved her. This went on for 6 months, until the day after her 21st birthday, when she woke up in the middle of the day, still drunk from the first legal cocktails of her life, in the middle of December, and got the children into the car, and found the car was too hot, and as she tried to wrench her black pea coat off one shoulder, and as she felt the last of the black Russians muscle through her veins, and as she hit a patch of black ice, she understood that there would be an accident. She could see the children hurt in the back of the seat, in the back seat, the windshield gone lacy, herself opening the door and running away. When the car stopped, someone will leg it, and that was the last thought Madeline or any of them ever had. No children, thought Leonora. She had intended to get herself upright and go looking for them. She should have eaten them, but she could. For a while, she tried to distract herself with the radios. Each wore poor Alan's family name like a badge on the pellicle of the speaker. She went from room to room and turned them on, but then she thought she could hear. Behind the sonorous day-long monologue of the news station, the awful brightness of Vivaldi on the classical station, are jokes cracked by a disc jockey named after an ancient king, the voices of her children. She tried to tune them in. You had to use the volume and the tuning knob and mincing little oscillations. Then there it was, the tootling rhythm of Dolly's conversation. Rosa humming at the back of her throat as though ready to defiantly swallow the sound should someone walk into the room. Marco sighing before he explained something. She wondered whether they each had a station. Dolly, Marco, Rosa. Maybe they had different radios even. No. They would be cuddled up together in one frequency the way they liked. But you could never tune them in clearly, and slowly the noise behind the newscast turned feral, howling, chirping, shrieking, a forest empty of children. Then she knew they were gone. The radios wouldn't turn off tight enough. The voices of strangers leaked through no matter how she turned the knob. She unplugged the radios, knocked the batteries from the backs. She could still hear that burble, somebody muttering at the sound of an engine a block away. She lay in bed. At her ear hummed the old clock radio with the numbered decagons that showed their corners as they turned to indicate that a minute had ended, or an hour, to hum a little louder then. She felt her torso, where her children would have been, had she managed to eat them. Not everyone who stops being human turns animal, but Leonora did. It was time to leave the house. The top of her back would humped with ursine fat, and she shambled like that too, bear-like, through the aisles of the grocery store at the end of the street. She shouldered the upright fridges of beer. She sniffed the air of the checkout lanes, panda-eyed and eagle-toed and lion-tailed, with a long braid down her back that snapped as though with muscles and vertebrae. The insides, too. Animals of the dark and deep, her kidneys dozing moles, her lungs full of bats, the organs that had anchored the children. Jellyfish, jellyfish, eel, manatee. Her wandering took her to the bakery, where she'd taken her children every Saturday morning of their early childhood to let poor Alan sleep in. In the angled case, she saw the loaves of challah. She saw something familiar in the shape. "Can I help you?" said the teenager behind the counter. His t-shirt had a picture of the galaxy on it, captioned, "You are here." She tapped the glass in front of the challah. "Please," she said, and he pulled the loaf out, and she said, "I don't need a bag." He'd already started angling the loaf from the bag's brown mouth. Who didn't need a bag for bread? "I don't need a bag," she repeated. She counted out the money and set it down. "Just the paper." He handed it self-consciously across the counter. When it was in her hands, she adjusted the paper around it, admired the sheen of the egg wash, its placid countenance. Then she carried it to a table in the window and spread out the wax paper and set the loaf upon it. Mark. She saw his sleeping baby self in the shape of the bread, knees and arms akimbo, head turned, as always, to the left. The girls cast different shadows. She put her hand to the loaf to check for oven warmth, not on the surface, maybe at the heart. Later, she wouldn't care what people thought of her. She'd cradle the loaf in her arms before eating, but now she patted the bread and then, with careful fingers, pulled it apart. That sense of invading a privacy that is offered up to you. Yeast, warmth, sweetness, a very child. Her mouth was full with it, and then her head and throat and stomach. She felt the feral parts of her grow sleepy and peaceable. Thereafter, every morning she went to the bakery and bought a challah and pretended it was one of her children. She knew she could never say this aloud. Rosa slept with her bottom in the air. Dolly, alone of the children, needed to be swaddled. Marco, Kimbo. She carried the day's loaf in her arms to the table. She patted it. Then she ate it. Not like an animal. Knob by knob, slowly. One loaf could last her 4 hours, washed down with water from the crenellated plastic cups the bakery gave away for free. That was her nourishment. She lived on bread and good manners and felt sick with her children. The new mothers of the neighborhood wished the bakery would throw the bulky, unkempt woman out, as they wished they felt guilty because they were trying to teach their children tolerance. But then they looked at the angled case. The center bay was filled with glittering sugared shortbread cookies, decorated according to the season. Hearts, shamrocks, eggs, flags, leaves, pumpkins, turkeys, candy canes, hearts again. Evidence. Bakeries were for children, and children were frighteningly in Orah. This was a trick of the radio. Again, the children were only tuned to their mother's fare. Sometimes the mother and child would walk by her table, and Leonora could see the tight, unhappy discomfort of judgment on the mother's face. "Say hello, Pearl," her mother would tell her child, and Pearl dutifully would say hello, and Leonora would wave. She knew that the mother was thinking, "Thank God she doesn't know what I'm thinking." These children neither pained nor interested her. They weren't her darlings, but every now and then a Pearl or Sammy would smile to her and even giggle, and she would want to nibble a kiss in the old way, a raspberry blown on the neck, a kiss with a bite at its heart. They weren't hers, they were sweet. But if you were the mother of dead children, that was over. You weren't allowed. On those days, she ordered a second loaf of bread, which she dragged home and tore apart. 5 years passed like nothing. She was recognized in the neighborhood as the monument she was, constructed to memorialize the tragedy, but with the plaque long since dropped off. She was Leonora. Her name had survived because the bakery workers remembered it, but that was all. Nobody imagined that she was a mother. She was, anyone who saw her presumed, a person who had always been exactly who she was. Poisoned, padded, eyes sunk into her face. She existed only at the table, eating bread in her finicking way. She spoke to the people behind the counter, that was all. Some of them were patient, and some of them weren't. Then one day a man came into the bakery, caught her eye, and smiled. Poor Alan, she thought reflexively, but then she remembered poor Alan was dead, though he'd named her in his will and set up a trust to take care of her. This man wore a green wool hat like a bucket. The hat looked expensive. He pulled it from his head and revealed a full head of white hair. No, he was never poor Alan, who'd lost his hair long before it faded. But she did know the man. He sat down across from her. The tabletop was for Micah, the green of trolleys. "Mike Wooster," he said. "Hello, Mike Wooster," said Leonora. She could smell her own terrible breath. She still slept in the bed and washed herself, but she did not always remember to brush her teeth. Why would she? She scarcely used them. Around his fists, then she set it in front of him. He had a sense he wanted to drop it over the remains of the day's bread. He said, "I'm Madeline's father." She heard the present tense of the sentence. "I know who you are." Everything about him was rich and comforted. "I heard you came here," he said. "That bread good?" She tore off the brown curd, a cheek, a clenched hand. She sniffed at it before she pushed it in her mouth. He cleared his throat. "We're having a memorial service, and my wife and I and our kids, well, we thought of you." He picked the hat back up, brushed some flakes of pollen from the brim. "I've thought of you." He said that to the hat, then got hold of himself. "Every day I've thought of you. You know," he said, "they turned my daughter into a monster too." The alcohol, the coke, the ice, everyone said that if one of those things hadn't been true, they never would have crashed. "Two," she said. The animals of her body were roaring back to life. They, whoever they were, had not turned Leonora into a monster. They had erased her. Newspapers, television, the terrible gabbling radio, which spoke only of the children's father, the left-behind man, the single parent, that poor man looking after his children. To lose all of them at once. Poor Alan had had a memorial service too, had invited her. Though he'd asked her to come to the front, she'd sat alone at the back of the church. A church? Since when? Drunk and stunned. Nobody spoke to her. She was a mother who'd let her children go. A creature so awful, nobody believed in her. She'd had to turn herself into a monster in order to be seen. Madeline never got a chance, said Mike Wooster, to redeem herself, but you could. You could be redeemed. She laughed at that, or part of her dead, a living thing sheltered in a cave inside of her. "Like a soul," he said. "Your soul can be redeemed." "Too late," she said. "Soul's gone." "Where?" he said. "Where do you think?" she said. At that he took her hand. "This only feels like hell," he said. "I know, I do know." She shook his head. She shook her head to refuse his sympathy. She could smell the distant desiccation of it. No. Why had he come here? She could not be redeemed. A coupon, a ticket. He had a dead child too, of course. She could feel it twitching through his fingers, the sorrow, the guilt, like schools of tiny flicking fish who swim through bone instead of ocean. He was not entirely human anymore either. Indeed, she could hear the barking dog of his heart wanting an answer. Her heart snarled back, but tentatively. If she accepted his sympathy, then she would have to feel sorry for him. She would have to transcend. Some people could. They could forgive and rise above their agony. She could feel the turning of her organs in their burrows, and she felt an old emotion, one from before, gratitude. She was thankful to remember that she was a monster. Many monsters. Not chimera, but a vivarium. Her heart snarled and snarled and snarled. She tried to listen to it. "The thing," Leonora told Mike Wooster, and she pulled her hand from his, "is that you can't unbraid a challah." "No?" He said. "Well, I guess not." "Would you like some?" she asked. He looked at the rubble of the day's loaf. "Oh, no, that's yours." "Let me get you one," she said, "please." "I don't need," Leonora said, rising. "It will be a pleasure to watch you eat." The end of that.